So, nothing interesting happened last weekend. Nothing at all, just a event called RBC 14, which may or may not have been the greatest event in RBC history. Hot take. That was it right there. I think this is the best thing that could happen in the RBC at this point in time. That was the best case scenario. Here's why. Yes, there was an issue. Yes, there was some backlash, and yes, there was some punishment gained, and there was aftermath stuff. This is going to make the community stronger, in my opinion. RBC 14 was a truly legendary event. A beautiful stadium, which may or not have been the problem. You had great commentary all around, not Ozzy, Grumpy, and Aiden Rooney. Aiden Rooney, he came out to play, man. He was very, very good that night. I think Ozzy came out like his usual self. Grumpy once again performed one of his better shows to date, and it was in general a pretty damn good time. The prelims showed up. That was pretty. The two fights there were pretty good, and the fight card. Oh boy, the fight card. Only one no-show, guys. That is a big deal. And of course, there was Iron Drake, but we're not going to get into that. But pretty much every fight on this card was spectacular. You're talking from the first fight to even the main event, which may have been the weakest point of the night, but we'll get to that later. I think after all the trials and tribulation, it was a very well put together event. The entrances were legendary. The fights were legendary. We may have seen the greatest fight in the history of the RBC. Everyone was pumped up. There was a sold out crowd. It was one of the most attended fights in the history of sport. Where else can I go with this? This was an incredible night. On the Sunday night, all the hype gave way to the action, and it was absolutely brilliant. I'm going to have a few points to go off of. About 7, I believe, but it may be a fewer. The first one was, let's go over this. The first point I want to go over is the issues. Let's get to the bad stuff first. There was problem with health, there was problem with damage, there was problems across the board. Guys, it was the same for both fighters. In my opinion, when you saw the Rebel Brook fight, you knew what you were going to get into. That's just my opinion. If you weren't, I don't know what to deal with, because problems like that don't get fixed in one night. That's where the tone of the entire night changed, in my opinion. That's where it got crazy. So going into the main event, I don't think there was an excuse. I think you knew exactly what was going to happen, and none of the fights would have changed an outcome when it came to that factor. That's just my opinion. Maybe the co-main event I will have some gripes about, but nothing really. Number 2, this is no one's fault. Nobody is to blame for this. Not a single person. Ray, one of the best shops hosts. I've been in a very good amount of servers with a lot of good hosts. With a lot of guys who are able to, I've never seen someone perform like Ray does. In the ring and as a host for a fight. He's very good at commentary too. There's a lot of things that Ray did right Sunday night. He was rightfully upset, and I think that was justified. This was not his fault. It was really nobody's fault that night. It was still a great night regardless, despite the technical difficulties, despite the timer issues. You figured it out, you got it done. That is the best part about it. And the executive decision, a very smart move. That's just my opinion. Let's get to the third point. Every single fight was top tier. Every single fight either was a classic or it had something going for it. The night obviously peaked in the first title fight, but that's not a bad thing. Because every fight leading up to it was perfect. After the first 2 fights, I was drained. I was exhausted. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. We had great decisions. We had amazing highlight reel knockouts. We had a 12-round fight that felt like a true 12-round fight in the RBC, which was a 7-round chess match, followed by the last 3 rounds being an absolute brawl. Let's get to the fourth point. Here's where we're talking about individual fights. The main event. That main event. Actually, the fourth point is going to be about the entrances. Let's start with that first. The fourth point is about the entrances. They were on point. And in my opinion, still my 2 favorites are Jakob's entrance with the HBK style zip line to the ring, but you also had NJJ's. NJJ's felt was like one of the most epic things I've ever seen in my life. It was brilliant. And it basically showed his point for the fight. That dude walked like a king. And it was an incredible fight. That's just me. Let's move on to the fights itself. Let's start with the main event. It may have been the lowest point of the evening, but that doesn't mean it was not a barn burner. The reason people were not as emotionally invested in it as the other two fights was because it ended so quickly. Here, if you have a gripe with the main event being counted, here's my counter argument. I said for a very long time, the longer the fight goes, the more it favors Cruzeiro. Somebody may contradict my point, but prove me wrong. Cruzeiro does not really end fights very early in any system, and he's proven it time and time again. And he beat Jakub Jankowski in 1 round. You would think if the damage was gonna be at that point, that Jakub could just drain himself and beat him. That's what my thinking was going into this fight. I mean, if it's going to be the health system being scuffed, Jakub's going to come out swinging. Those first 3 rounds need to go to him. But Cruzeiro's pressure pretty much negated that. We saw Cruzeiro become the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in front of our very eyes. That guy is the best fighter in the world. In my opinion, he shouldn't be the best draw in the sport, which is a controversial opinion. But he is the best fighter in the world. Without a doubt. Let's get to that point too. Why shouldn't he be the biggest draw? Because his fights are not... Oh, should I say this? His fights are not the most exciting. When it comes to the other champions, I think Bugatti's fights are exciting because they end really early and you're like, holy shit, did he just do that? Did he just piece up that guy? And Ozzy Divine, his fight style is naturally fun to watch because it's a dominant style and it shocks you every time. It's like Bugatti's fight style, but it takes slightly longer to develop. And then you have the fact that NJJ and Jam Jones put on Fight of the Night candidates. They are always Fight of the Night! If there are 3 guys in this sport who are always Fight of the Night, it's Harry, it's NJJ, and it's Jam Jones. Those 3 have always been Fight of the Night for me. In any pay-per-view they've been in. Let's get to the point of the fact that Cruzeiro is not the most fun guy to watch. His fight style is pressure, and that can be exciting at times. RBC 8 was a great example of me being emotionally invested in a fight like that. RBC 10 was. I just don't get the emotional connection in a fight of Cruzeiro that I do with someone like Bugatti, Ozzy, Jam, or NJJ. That is not to take credit for him because he's probably a better fighter than all those guys I just mentioned. But my goodness. You're looking at the best fighter in the world. To date. Now, what I just said about him being the actual best, we don't know that. He just took someone out of the equation in Jakub, basically saying, yeah, he's not better than me. And I just proved that to you. I think that means a lot. I think that means very, very much. Let's move on to the next point, which is going to be Bugatti versus Maldonado. A few guys told me that this was the fight they were looking forward to. I couldn't disagree with you because it was one of the most interesting stylistic fights in the history of the division, and historically the heavyweight division has not been the most intriguing, and this was such an intriguing fight. It set up a lot. The winner of this fight most likely fights Tams King. That was many's thinking going into this. However, this fight had controversy behind it. Because when I say Cruzeiro was probably going to win the later rounds and he proved everyone wrong, there's no controversy in that for me because it was something I didn't expect him to do when the system was scuffed that I thought would favor Jakub. I could be wrong there. But however, this completely favored Bugatti because he's a quick finisher. He's a great counterpuncher who just barrages you with these long combos that can destroy you. Amazing power punches. One of the best power punchers ever against a guy who needs time to develop. He needs time to get technical with it. But he had to slug with him. Maldonado had to throw everything he had at the Bosnian Beast. There was no other choice. And that's never going to favor you. Everyone knew, and most people didn't even think he was going to win the fight anyway. Most people thought he was going to lose to Bugatti anyway, no matter what. So that was the big thing going in, and that's... There are two counterpoints there. The first one is supporting that the fight could have gone his way was the system favored Bugatti. However, most people didn't even think that he was going to win because he knew he had to slug with him. So if he had to slug with him, no matter what, then how could he win the fight even without that system? If he couldn't get away from Bugatti, getting in the pocket and throwing body shots and hard hands, maybe there wasn't a way for him to win this fight. Because Bugatti does not have... He is able to get in and just throw short but deadly combos. Power punches all around. There is just no... It's not much of a jab-oriented fight where he pressures you. It's him just standing in your face and saying, I'm going to knock you out and there's nothing you can do about it. That's his entire game plan. I think it's a great defensive fighter in Maldonado. I thought, maybe he can negate that, but no, the fight didn't show it. It didn't show for me, it didn't show for anyone else. I'm not trying to dog on one guy. I just think that, in my opinion, I didn't see him winning the fight. Okay, now let's move on to the fight that everyone wanted to see. To the fight everyone actually cared about. Guys, this is why I said this should have been a main event, because I knew this was going to be the best fight on the card. I just had a feeling. Maybe Jakob versus Cruzaro, if it was 12 rounds, could have produced something legendary. But this fight was so fucking close. You're talking the two most exciting fighters in the sport, who have the most exciting styles. It's crazy to think about. Jam Jones and NJJ are basically the same level, okay? No matter what NJJ will say, no matter what Jam Jones will say, these guys are literally equal. And that one bad round can shift the course of a fight. That was the greatest fight I've ever called. And I've called some pretty damn good ones. I called their first fight. I called Jakob versus SSI. I called the second Cruzaro Khalid fight. I called their sequel. I've called a few good fights from RBC 8 to RBC 14. That was the best one I've ever seen. That went 12 rounds. I saw that in my zone with Jam and Harry, so I had some reason to expect that it could go 12. Guys, it went 12 rounds. And it was amazing. The fans were silent. They didn't know what was going to happen. There was no time for corner adjustments. They had to think. They had to think mid-fight. They had their corners. They had Jam's corner talking to them. It was a chaotic fight, and I thought many fans were tuning out during the rounds that Notorious was winning the first few rounds. It picked up. People realized, oh my god, Notorious just threw over almost 500 strikes in the first 4 rounds. He loses 6 in a row. I think it was from 4 to 9 or 5 to 10 that he lost. I need to rewatch the fight, but that's what I thought. Then NJJ wins the last 2 or 3 rounds, which basically gives the fight to him. Now let's talk about who actually should have won the fight, because everyone in commentary was assuming they're probably going to give this to Notorious because the rounds are more significant. At this point, the judging was going to be absolutely wild because you had to factor in knockdowns. And I don't like giving 10-8s. It's the inner MMA in me, and Ozzy said this exact thing too. I don't like giving 10-8s. It's not something that I would do often. I don't like a boxing rule like that. And I think the rule should be different for RBC because the knockdowns are going to be so frequent. However, when you look at how the judges are going to score it, it was NJJ's fight to win. The judges made the right call based on their criteria, and he won the fight. He had this weird stretch from 4 to 9 where it just felt like he wasn't there. The volume was dissipating, and then he finished the fight off with over 1,000 strikes thrown. And that was brilliant. Jam Jones fought the fight one of the smartest he's ever fought. He made a lot of mistakes in there, but he corrected it, and he almost won the fight. If he just didn't give up a knockdown, there's a good chance that he would have won that fight. Maybe just don't give up one knockdown, you could have won the fight. But man, oh man, did NJJ come to fight. From the entrance, that was one of the most epic I've ever seen, to the fight itself, which was the greatest I've ever seen. That fight's going down in history. Let's make one more point. Let's look at the other fights. Let's look at Rebel Brooks' fight versus Myron Yeager. Both guys looked legit in there. Rebel Brook, guys, is legit. He is going to fight for a title soon. If you're not going to have the unification bout, Rebel Brook is your next title challenger. We are all wrong. He is great. Raymundo was right. This guy wants it bad. So does he fight the winner of the unification bout and we expect an upset? Well, not necessarily. There may be one more fight for him to fight, which could be someone like Harry Golovkin. It could be someone like Jam Jones trying to get back to Jam Jones. I just now figured out. Let's have Jam Jones fight him. I think it's a logical thing to do. RBC 15, you want to book it? Have no problem with that. Now, let's go over Khalid versus Casper, which may have been the most bizarre fight I've seen. Because you had the introduction of that Scuff Health, which almost screwed up the entire night, but it didn't. It was wild. We thought, oh my god, Khalid Rashad is just putting a clinic on Casper. Ray is wrong about Casper. Oh no! Casper just came back. He's making this a dogfight. Khalid Rashad might legitimately lose. Ozzy is finally paying attention to the fight. He's like, oh my god, he's gonna lose. He didn't actually say that, but that's what I thought he was thinking. Then Khalid emerges as a true contender he is. He dug deep in a weird health system and he won the fight. That's a true champion's heart, and he might be next in line for the title. I'm not saying I want to see Cruzaro fight Khalid again. I'm just saying that's on the table. It's not going to be as big as Cruzaro versus Yakov hype-wise, but it might be a better fight. That's what's on the line here. Let's go over one more talking point. Let's go over another good fight. How about Gavidas versus Gio Wilder, which is one of the wildest fights I've ever seen. That was a unanimous draw. A draw. Both judges said it was a draw. That is weird to me. First of all, there's only 2 judges, which makes for difficult scoring. Second of all, what a fight. I was saying right there, oh my god, this is fight of the night. I said that was fight of the night. Wow, my surprise when it was upended almost twice. That was a true classic to open up the show. Gio Wilder is legit. Gavidas Augustus is back. But I learned a lot from both guys. But that's pretty much it. It was a great night. I think the community needs to improve from the backlash of the event. I think I need to improve in some areas and how I saw it. But I thought it was a fantastic night. And we all should. It was a well put together event. The stadium was beautiful. I would love to go back there a year down the road. It was one of the best ran cards ever. It was one of the best crowd attendances. I think it peaked at like 48 or 49. We almost hit 50, guys. That's crazy. We almost hit 50 in an RBC pay-per-view. We didn't eclipse 35 at RBC 10, which is supposedly the biggest fight in the history of the sport. But at the time, we didn't really have much hype. But in a fight that was announced 7 days ago, I don't know if it's a record or anything, but man, people showed up. And not just fighters, guys, fans! Fans wanted to see this fight. Everything was top notch. From the reffing, to the hosting, to the fight, to the commentary. It was all over the place. I'm very happy for it. And it's going to be a monumental event in RBC. It has lessons that we need to learn from. But it has fights we need to learn from. Because boy were those fights fantastic. And boy was that one of my favorite events to call. That was one of my favorite events to call. Aussie Divine, Grumpy Gunner, Aiden Rooney. The foursome, the fearsome force. That's a great commentary team. Ray, the best host in the game. And we have more events. RBC 15 is supposed to be bigger than this? Wow. Wow, that's going to be pretty good. But guys, I have one question to ask you. Is anything going to top this? This was the greatest fight card ever assembled. It was consequential at everything. Do you think the fights were? Do you think that this night was worth it? Did you enjoy it? If not, let me know.